7th day of February. Now, I've told you all, and I teased this interview, I've got Jeffrey Desovic backstage right now. So we all know what he's here for, here to talk to. So just stand by here. Going to bring him in just a quick second here. We're going to take a quick break, get that out of the way. I'll be back with minute 19, and I see Mr. Desovic is backstage. Good to see you, man. And we'll get this show on the road. Can't wait. Hello, Sports Scope followers. After 5 years of doing this program once a week, balancing a 60-hour work week job, I've decided to do the program 5 days a week, 1 hour a night, taking a significant pay cut. So I've started a Patreon page, which is Patreon, Patreon/SportsScope, spelled the same way at the bottom of the screen you see there. For $5 a month, 17 cents a day, you can help support the program. You ask yourself, why Sports Scope? Well, I bring in such big names such as Al Borges, former Auburn offensive coordinator, and I cover the big news in sports that the corporate media will not cover. If you want to contribute more than $5 a month, you can go use the Cash App. The cash tag is Sports Scope, again, spelled the same way. Or you can go to the Zelle app, sportscope@gmail.com. SportsScope has about 5,000 followers and growing. If you want to advertise on the program, you can email me. The word is SportsScope, spelled the same way again, @gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the program. Okay, guys. Now I'm live here. Do a little intro music. I'm sure Jeffrey's familiar with this song here. A little bit of Bob Dylan there. Hey, man, good to see you. Hey, did you ever see that movie, Ruby Hurricane Carter?
The Hurricane. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That's a really that was a well-received movie about former boxer, middleweight champion contender, Ruben Hurricane Carter, who, of course, was wrongfully convicted and ultimately exonerated.
Yeah. I'd brought in, let's see, Jack Hirsch. He's a Hall of Fame boxing writer from the New York area. And he interviewed him after he got out of prison and everything. And he tells a really funny story. He says that the Hurricane, he wanted to ask him about his story. And Ruben wanted to talk about the boxing world and where everything was at the time of the interview. And he's like, I can tell that he was getting a little irritated. And I didn't want to push too much. I didn't want to get the guy back put in prison for beating me up for being a pushy reporter.
True story, right? That's hilarious. True story.
Yeah.
I met Ruben Hurricane Carter once, and I also met his co-defendant John Artis, who took care of him.
Nice. Yeah, I met him years ago in Austin P. He came to Austin P and spoke with us, and I just thought that was the greatest thing. It was probably early 2000s. The guy that you just mentioned that was with him. And I know Ruben, I want to say he passed away in 2014, the Hurricane Carter here. So everybody, this is Jeffrey. Sorry about that. Jeffrey. Now, Jeffrey, I like to do things a little bit different. I've listened to some of your other interviews. By the way, thank you again for coming on, man. You got me hyped up today. I'm really excited with Super Bowl week. And, it's good to bring on another sports fan. I read your Sports Illustrated article again, listened to a couple of podcasts you've been on. And only thing I want to do is just kind of get everybody up to date. And, of course, if I'm off on something, my information, just cut in. And we'll get up to a certain point, and I'll just let you run with it, brother. And you run with it. Only time I may stop you if you use a $50 legal term, because my niece watches the show, and quite frankly, I only took one media class. I got a communications degree. I had one media class, media law, and I barely passed that between me and you, okay? I did not like the professor. The guy was just He was a former lawyer, no offense. I got a lot of good friends and lawyers, but man, he was hard to get along with.
So we'll have no such difficulty here. And listen, I like new things as part of experiencing life. So,
All right,
however
brother.
you dictate, you lead, I'll follow. I'll be the running back. You be the fullback.
Hey, man. See, there you go. There you go.
Cut me that path to get through the line, and we get into the end zone. Okay.
All right, brother. All right, brother. I love that. So now, you were born in Terrytown, Pennsylvania, 1973, correct?
Terrytown, New York.
Or New York, excuse me. New York.
Yeah, that's
New
correct.
York, 73. You went to Peak Skill High School, right?
Right.
And you live with your mom. Now, did you have any brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have I have a brother who's 3.5 years younger than I am, and I also live with my grandma.
Okay. And you didn't know your dad didn't live with you all. You didn't meet him till later on in life, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So far, so good. And now Peak Skill's about 50 miles north of New York City, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So far, so good. And
yeah, you studied well in the film room. The head coach is loving you so far.
Hey man, I try to do it, brother. I try to do it. Now, you skipped the grade because you were a pretty smart kid growing up, right?
Right.
But you didn't fit in, so you kind of failed on purpose to get with your own age group?
That's right. Yes, that got caught up to me in high school. Yeah, freshman year. That's correct. Very impressive.
All right. So far, so good. So let's fast forward to November of 1989, November 15th. One of your classmates that you barely know. Now, I may be saying her last name right, but this is all in court records I found online. One of those PDF. I've got it all in my phone here, or tablet. Angela Correa?
That's 1,000%. Wow.
Okay. And she was reported missing on the 16th by her family, and her body was found on November 17th. They claimed she had been raped, and it was in a wooded area, Hillcrest Park, also known as the Pit.
That's right.
Okay. Here's the hurdle. All right. Take over, brother.
Okay, so in the course of the police investigation, they interviewed a lot of students from the high school, and some of the kids that they spoke to said that it suggested to the police that they speak to me because I was quiet. I was to myself. I didn't quite fit in. I lived a double life in high school. I didn't quite think of it that way, but in hindsight, that's what it was. I mean, after school, I was there was a lot of kids in the apartment complex where I lived at. And I was one of the main kids, and pretty much whatever I would suggest would generally be what we do, whether that's stickball, basketball, Monopoly, video games, swimming, bike riding, you name it. I suggested it. We probably did it. But that's my life after school. In school, though, I didn't quite. Those were kids different from that neighborhood, and I didn't quite fit in. So, hence the other students suggesting to the police, "Hey, go talk to Jeff." I guess their theory was people that don't quite fit in or loners commit heinous crimes, right? I have to believe that was their theory. Now, in addition to that, I was a sensitive teenager. I'm 16 years old, and this was my first real brush with death. And so I had an emotional reaction. And the police thought that, well, you barely know this girl, but you're emotional this way. This seems suspicious, right? So although in a broader context, I wasn't all that different from the rest of the people in the city of Peekskill because it really shook everybody up to the point that free mental health counseling was offered to anybody who wanted it, keeping in mind that murders were pretty rare in Peekskill. Then the police, being somewhat inexperienced in homicides, they decided to get a psychological profile from the NYPD. And so that profile purported to have the psychological characteristics of the actual perpetrator, and I had the misfortune of matching that, so a reinforcing factor. So for the next 6 weeks, the police played this cat and mouse game with me, in which half the time they would speak to me as if I was a suspect, and then when they would push too hard and I'd get afraid and I'd want to get away from them, they would switch it up, and they developed and promoted this Jeff as a junior detective helper theme, which appealed to me because prior to being a teenager, I wanted to be a cop.
Yeah.
And yeah, so and then in addition to that, they did the good cop bad cop routine, and because, as you alluded to earlier, my father was never involved in my life. I never saw him till much later in life. I began to look at the cop who was pretending to be my friend as a father figure. So that went on for, and in terms of this junior detective helper theme, I mean, they would say things like, the kids won't talk freely around us, they will around you. Let us know if you hear anything. Stop in from time to time. They'd ask me opinion questions and congratulate me that my opinion was correct.
Yeah.
So eventually they got me to agree to take this lie detector test. They said, look, we got some new information in the file. We want to share that with you. That's going to allow you to be more helpful to us. But first, you got to take and pass this polygraph. So the next day, rather than report to the high school, I went to the police station for a test. Mom and grandma thought I was in school since it was a school day. So they don't call around looking for me. And they drove me from Peekskill, New York, which is in Westchester County, suburbs. They drove me 40 minutes away by car to the town of Brewster in Putnam County, which means that I'm not able to leave anymore on my own. I'm totally dependent upon the police.
Yeah.
I had no attorney present. They didn't give me anything to eat the entire time I was there. There's 3 cops that came there with me from Peekskill. But then there was also the Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, who was the polygraphist, Investigator Daniel Stevens. And he's dressed like a civilian. He never identifies himself as law enforcement, and he never read me my rights. So he gives me this 4-page brochure which explains how the polygraph works, but then it has a lot of big words in it that I don't understand. But then I figured, well, I'm here to help the police, so what does it matter?
So your mom advised you not to do this.
She advised me not to interact with the police generally, but that was at the very beginning of that 6-week run-up period. But yes, you are correct. But just
so you're essentially looking at this like it's some kind of unpaid internship, like a ride-along.
Correct.
You're totally just being conceived here and misled.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And I could see anybody. Exactly right. I mean, that would be kind of fun for someone that age. Hey, man, I'm helping out here, and this is a good learning experience. I'm just trying to, get some context here. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, don't. Yeah. That was great. That was true. All right. So from there, the polygraphist gave me countless cups of coffee, which it seems pretty clear the purpose of that was to get me nervous. I mean, as you might imagine, at 16, I really wasn't a coffee drinker, and he was like a virtual coffee. He was like a virtual.
I'm a big coffee drinker. I get fidgety too. Like crazy.
Yeah. Well, no sooner did I finish a cup and put it down, he had the thing halfway filled. Yeah. You want another one?
I know it's not a laugh, and you weren't funny then, but now it's just.
Of course, yeah. We do dark humor, so that I don't lose
my
mind.
There you go.
Don't lose on all the humor. No offense taken. I needed to stay sane. Believe me.
I hear you, man.
So that was like 5 to 7 rounds of that, and then from there, so I'm really wired up, right? And then he decided to wire me up quite literally, as in the wires to the polygraph machine, and then he launched into his 3rd-degree tactics. So he raised his voice at me. He invaded my personal space. He kept asking me the same questions over and over again. And as each hour passed, my fear increased in proportion to the time. I really wasn't used to talking to adult men, keeping in mind the absence of my father, an extremely limited interaction with my uncles, much less somebody who was conducting himself in this way. And he seemed to get more and more ferocious as each hour passed by. And he kept that up for 6.5 to 7 hours. Towards the end, he said, "What do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it." And that really shot my fear through the roof. And at that point, the officer who's been pretending to be my friend, he came in the room and told me that the other cops are going to harm me. He's been holding them off. He can't do so indefinitely. I have to help myself. Look, just tell them what they want to hear. You can go home afterwards. You're not going to be arrested. Being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old, I wasn't thinking the long term. I was just concerned with my safety in the moment. I was in fear of my life. The fact that I didn't know where I was and no one else knew either loomed rather large in my mind. I was overwhelmed emotionally and psychologically. There was this possibility of harm he threw in the air. There's this false life preserver. So I took the out which he offered. And I made up
Yeah.
a story based on the information he gave me in the course of the interview and in the 6-week run up to that. So by the time it was all said and done, I not only had falsely confessed, but I had collapsed on the floor in a fetal position, crying uncontrollably. Obviously, I was arrested. I was charged with a murder and rape.
Yeah. So you charged with the murder and rape. We're pretty close to the same age. I was born in 81. You're born in 73. And you got to think about the technology then. I grew up inner city here. I'm a first generation college student. My parents are separated. I kind of had that issue with my mother having run-ins with the police over, being pulled over for random stuff, that I have that fear in the back of my mind then, thinking, well, these guys, they're the authority. Who's going to hold them? I mean, I'm scared to death for little stuff like that. So I can understand, even you being a teenager there, you don't have anybody to tell you otherwise. You're thinking, hey, these guys can take me up in the woods and there could be another murder here and nobody know anything about it because they got the badge. So I can see where the fear would come from. I'm just trying to put myself in that time and place. You're talking about 1989. You don't have any lawyers in your family. I don't think. Did you have any? You don't know anything about
no
this.
Lawyers in my family, no.
Right. And then no father figure, nothing like that. I mean, I can totally understand that. Go ahead.
Right. So then from there, before the trial happens, there was a DNA test was performed. There was seminal fluid found in and around the victim.
This is one of my listeners here. Have an older criminal.
So it doesn't match me, but rather than acknowledge they made a mistake, they instead continue to prosecute full speed ahead. In order to explain away the DNA test result, the prosecutor got the medical examiner to commit fraud. Basically, the medical examiner is supposed to document their findings in paper and in the recorder as the autopsy is done. So it's only 6 months after doing this autopsy, only in response to the DNA not matching me, that he suddenly claims, well, I remembered that I forgot to document medical evidence which showed that Angela Correa had been promiscuous. And that's which was a lie. But that's what opened the door for the prosecutor to argue to the jury that, well, that was how the DNA didn't match Deskovic, and yet he was still guilty. Taking his lie a step further, he mentioned another youth by name that he claimed had slept with the victim. But he never had a DNA test result performed. A test performed. He never even called him as a witness. He just made the unsupported argument to the jury. And he got away with that primarily because my lawyer let him get away with that. Secondarily, the victim's family was not coming to court, so they had no idea that her reputation was being trashed in this way in the furtherance of the prosecutor trying to wrongfully convict me. Speaking of my lawyer, he never interviewed or called my alibi as a witness. I was actually playing wiffle ball when the crime happened.
You were not in school that day, the day the crime happened, correct?
Well, no, I was. I was at school. I was at school that day. I came into school late the day after the crime happened.
Okay, gotcha.
That's what you're referring to. But then again, that's not really anything out of the ordinary because not that it's anything to be proud of. But I frankly came to school late every morning. That was the regular thing. So to the point that they gave me study hall in the morning so that it wouldn't adversely affect a grade. So he didn't call my alibi as a witness, never interviewed him, never used the DNA to argue that proved the confession was coerced and false, never discredited the medical examiner, rarely met with me, always shut me up when I was trying to explain to him that I was innocent, what happened in the interrogation room. And another thing is that as a lawyer, when you defend a case where there's a false confession, you have to answer that confession. You have to explain the confession. You have to disprove the confession. Bring it all together in your closing argument. But he didn't do that. Sometimes he argued to the jury the confession never happened. Other times he said it was coerced, and at still other times he was arguing that it was false. So by just taking a let's just throw things against the wall approach, he had to have been there with no credibility at all. And so There was two other irregularities really quickly in terms of the trial. So first of all, the polygraph test results were not supposed to be admissible because it's not a scientific machine and it's prejudicial. But because the coerced false confession happened in the course of the polygraph, the judge created this backdoor rule, and he allowed the polygraphers to repeatedly tell the jury that I failed it.
Oh, wow.
And lastly, the victim's clothes, including her bra, which the jury asked to see the bra, which was important because one of the statements that they coerced out of me was I said that I ripped her bra off. They asked to see the bra, and there's some bras, the way that they're made, you can't rip them off. And once they asked to see that, the judge told them that the bra and the clothes were left in the courtroom over the weekend, and apparently the janitors thought that it was garbage, so they threw it out, and it wasn't available any longer.
Okay, and let me put this in towards the audience, and correct me if I'm wrong. Nobody, no witnesses said they saw you at this woman's place of residence, nor does any witnesses say they saw you at this park where the body was found, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to,
there's no witnesses saying that. There's no informants. There's no criminals that have gotten caught committing crimes, and now they're going to, give evidence against a bigger criminal in exchange for their freedom. And I was with Jeff. Jeff confessed to me. None of that. The only thing we're saying here is there's this false confession, which was not videotaped, not audio taped, no signed confession, just the cop's word for it, and they left the threats and false promise. This is the only.
You have no criminal history whatsoever, as you know.
None whatsoever. No.
Okay.
So the last thing is the jury sent out a note on the third day of deliberations, and they're asked the judge, well, if we don't come up with a verdict, are we going to be sequestered? We're going to be kept in a hotel away from our family, access cut off from newspapers, television, radio. Is that what's going to be our situation over the Christmas holiday if we don't come up with a verdict? And the judge said yes. And at that point, I've learned many years later, it was 11-1 for a conviction. There was one holdout juror who thought I was innocent, but they were pressuring him. They were pressuring him, and then when that answer to that note came out, that ratcheted the pressure up, and nobody wanted to be there over the Christmas holiday, including that juror. So he switched his vote to guilty, and as a result, I was found guilty of murder and rape, which I did not commit.
Wow. So what comes over you when something like that actually sinks in? What is your reaction? Are you in total shock, or do you think you're going to wake up and this is a nightmare?
I was in total shock.
Yeah,
I was in total shock, and I remember thinking to myself, well, wait a minute, wait a minute. Did I hear that right? Did I miss the word "not" in front of the word "guilty"? That was how surreal that it was. I had been charged as an adult, tried as an adult, and so I was given a 15 to life sentence, which is an adult sentence. The judge sentenced me despite saying maybe you are innocent, and I was sent to a men's maximum security prison where I wound up losing 7 appeals. I got turned down for parole because a large part based on my maintaining my innocence rather than expressing remorse and taking responsibility. I was ultimately cleared through further DNA testing vis-a-vis the DNA data bank. They took the crime scene DNA, which didn't match me, put it in the data bank. It matched the actual perpetrator. And so all my charges were dismissed after 16 years in prison. And the actual perpetrator was subsequently arrested and convicted for the murder. His DNA was only in the data bank because left free while I was doing time for his crime, he killed a second victim 3.5 years later after killing the victim in my case.
Wow. So go back to so you first become, you get into prison here, and what was your reaction to the first day? How did that first day go?
I remember being in handcuffs, having a chain around my waist. My legs are fastened together. They're fastened to the legs of the prisoner on the bus next to me. I remember how large the prison wall loomed. I remember how menacing the barbed wire appeared. I don't mind sharing with you that at 17 years old, weighing about 140, 150 pounds, I was really frightened. I'm in a maximum security prison with fully formed adults, many of whom are guilty of very serious violent crimes. So it was, frankly, I was afraid. It felt like I
Yeah.
was in a totally out of control situation.
Did you have a panic attack or anything like that?
Yeah, I did have a panic attack, and I didn't know what to do from one second to the next. I was really frightened, and it was, quite frankly, it was hard to be surrounded by the walls in the prison cell. I mean, I wasn't used to that.
Yeah.
So that was very difficult, and I had to keep fighting off feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, thoughts of giving up, occasionally suicidal ideation.
Yeah.
Prison was violent. There were maybe 3 or 4 stabbings or fightings every day. There was violence that didn't involve weapons. There was gang activity, so you always had to be alert. There were times in the course of my incarceration I was beat up. One time I nearly lost my life. And
Yeah.
then, of course, because I did the best that I could to defend myself, then I got in trouble for that because that meant I was fighting. Food was terrible. I mean, sometimes it wasn't fully cooked. Other times it was.
Yeah.
Other times it was burned. And for most intents and purposes, though not literally, I essentially did most of the time by myself. My grandmother passed away while I was wrongfully imprisoned. The kids on the school bus and in the school used to tell my brother that his brother was a rapist, and would try to hit him and stab him with pencils. So he eventually
wow.
dropped. He eventually dropped out of school himself and turned to drugs and alcohol. He eventually cleaned himself up, but the after effects of that experience the days, the years where he was running the street, living a criminal lifestyle to support his habit. He still retains a lot of the mannerisms, way of dressing, and way of talking. So he's still impacted on that. So,
wow. Yeah. Now, did you have a cellmate, or did you have any problems?
half the time I did, and half the time I did not. They started doing double selling back in '95. Prior to that, I didn't. But then once '95 happened, sometimes I had cellmates, and sometimes I did not. I was fortunate. I always had cellmates that were rather reasonable.
Okay. Good deal. Good
But
deal, man. Yeah.
sure.
So,
In terms of how I survived, sometimes belief in God was one thing. Another
yeah.
thing was I kind of broke the sentence down. I didn't think, well, I'm doing 15 to life. I thought I was just doing a year or two.
Yeah.
To the next appeal happened, which I was sure I was going to win. I was going to go home. I used to go to the law library, so studying the law gave me a sense of comfort and empowerment. I studied other cases that ended in
You
exoneration.
studied law while you were in prison?
I studied law while I was in prison. Yeah.
So you said in another interview that you had the opportunity to be in isolation, but that it's the 23-hour day, something to get the 1 hour out, but you couldn't get the programs, right?
Yeah, I wanted to go to program. Yeah, they said, listen, the guard said, do you want protective custody? I'm like, well, what's that? And they said, well, that's if you feel as though your life is in danger, you could tell us that. And, they will keep you. Our way of protecting you would be, we would keep you in the cell 23 hours a day. You just come out 1 hour a day for recreation, and it would be by yourself, and yeah, so I didn't even, I just thought I couldn't do that. I thought, look, this is bad enough. I want to be able to go to recreation. I want to go to educational programs. I want to get out of my cell every opportunity I can. And so my line of reasoning at age 17, dealing with that question, was I thought to myself, well, listen, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe that this happened. I'm not going to make my situation worse by agreeing to go to protective custody. So I'm going to go to the general population and take my chances. And if somebody kills me, well then I guess I don't have to worry about doing the rest of this life sentence.
Hey, that's the way to look at it, man. Now, everybody else, I noticed they want to poo-poo over the God part. I'm out of Nashville. We're in the Bible Belt, man. How did you find God? Were you a Christian before you, or a person of faith?
Yeah. So I went to Catholic school from grades 2 through 8. I was an altar boy the whole bit. Um, I did lose my faith a little bit, and
Yeah.
I haven't talked about this in like years, so but I'll
Yeah.
share a
No,
little bit.
man. Take your
And so
time on this.
sure. So look, there was a in the prison they give you a number, and the first two numbers, is the year you enter the state system. So I saw this old timer, and he had he had like a 80 number, which meant by that point he had been in like 10 or 11 years minimum. But he had this look of peace on his face, which I wanted that for me.
Yeah.
So I asked him what that was about. How did he get there? And I did wind up ultimately embracing the Islamic faith. That's what he was, and it gave me a sense of comfort. It gave me something else to throw myself into. It gave me a group of people to socialize with that were a little bit safer than the rest of the population. And I embraced that. And look, was there a benefit in keeping the riffraff away from me a little bit? Yeah, I mean, that wasn't why I did it, but no question about it. That was certainly
another benefit,
an indirect benefit. But that cost me, because in my later years, in my 20s, there were times where I had to protect people over problems that they got into that really weren't my problems. And eventually the radicals amongst the prison group, in the last 5-6 years, they all wanted me dead. They couldn't stand me. So that was clearly a two-way thing. But just to fast forward that a little bit, so I practiced that for maybe like 15 and a half years. I did practice for about a year and a half when I came home, but then I had this mental paralysis here, because on one hand there was this faith where I paid money for study materials. I used to go to classes. I used to teach. I fought for people. So this was not just a prison thing, and it did get me through. But on the other hand, I'm free for the first time as an adult. What is it to have a drink? What is it to go on a date? What is sexuality, the nightlife, different types of music, all these things which I'm from practicing that faith. I'm either not allowed to do it all, or in such a restricted manner as to make it outside my grasp. So I wasn't really sure what to do. So I was kind of stuck. And at the same time, I met a lot of people just in the course of my advocacy work, which I began when I was released, in terms of pushing for policy changes aimed at preventing wrongful convictions. What happened to me happened to other people. Look, I met some Buddhists, I met some Hindus, I met some Jews, I met people of no form of faith, I met some Christians, I met some Catholics, some Protestants, and I really just couldn't dismiss people anymore.
Well, it's like New York City, wasn't it?
Like New York City.
I lived in New York for a year, by the way, the city.
Yeah. So eventually I rolled around to where I am now, which is, look, I'm spiritual. I'm not religious. 1,000% I believe in God, for sure. I just don't apply a label to it. I'm not about a lot of the rules and regulations. And look, whatever somebody believes in, this is how I look at it. If that works for you, if that gives you a sense of peace, if you understand who you are in the world, hey, do it. And if you change it up tomorrow, I'm still here. I don't believe in the us versus them based on religious beliefs, or having enmity with people because they believe something different. So that's kind of like the place where I graduated at, where I'm at today. That was my spiritual religious.
Hey man,
journey.
no, that's fine. I'm curious now. Now tell me about this program that got you out. I mean, this is interesting.
Yeah, there was an organization called the Innocence Project. They represent people pro bono across the country.
Pickle says,
yes, it was created by Barry Scheck and co-founder Peter Neufeld, and they free wrongfully convicted prisoners across the country in cases where DNA.
Is that correct? 4 to 6%.
That is a figure that is often quoted. Sometimes they say 5, other people say 1, some people say half. I personally think it's 15 to 20%. It's really not scientific, because you can only count the exonerations. You can't count the wrongful convictions. But that is a frequently cited number. So that person was correct. Okay. So they agreed to take my case, and they did ultimately exonerate me. And I was an individual advocate for 5 years of my release. I became a columnist for a weekly newspaper. I was speaking across the country. I was doing media interviews, creating privacy awareness. I was also regularly meeting with elected officials. Got a scholarship from Mercy College to get the bachelor's degree, which I had started while in prison, but then funding was cut. Got a master's degree in John Jay College of Criminal Justice. I thought the extra credential would make me a more effective advocate. My thesis was written on wrongful conviction cause and reforms. And during that same 5-year time period, which was all prior to being financially compensated, I was simultaneously wrestling with a lot of challenges and difficulties. I mean, the psychological after effects, then the stigmatic, well, you were in prison for 16 years wrongfully, but you were there. So how much of that rubbed off on you? Is it safe to have you around? So certainly an obstacle in terms of interpersonal.
And you didn't get any other charges while you're in there?
I did not get any other charges while I was in there. No. And since we're mentioning charges, we did mention before I'd never been arrested for anything prior to this. Right. And in my 16 years of freedom since then, I have never been arrested for anything, just to round out that.
Yeah.
There was the technology was different. Cell phones, internet, GPS hadn't been created. Culture was different. Cities and towns looked different. It was a lonely experience. I was always passed over for gainful employment. So other than writing the articles and doing speaking engagements, I really wasn't able to earn money. So I lacked stability of housing. I was a couple of weeks away from the homeless shelter that Mercy College, which had given me the scholarship for the bachelor's, allowed me to live on campus. It was awkward when I'd meet up with my extended family because I knew who they were from memories when I was younger, but they had either never come to see me or did so on such a sporadic, inconsistent basis that
basically just your mom every 6 months, right?
Right. The last 5-6 years, she came every 6 months. Before that, a little bit more frequent, but as that long trip got old after a while. So eventually, I was compensated. I received some money. And then I used some of it to start the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, the website of which it goes across your screen, your Cryon. And then we've gotten 12 people. We got 12 people home, helped pass 3 laws. I became an advisory board member of a statewide coalition called It Could Happen to You, and we passed another 6 laws. And at some point, I got tired of sitting in the front row and of the courtroom, and I went to law school. I became an attorney. In pursuit of the dream of exonerating others, and I just had first success about 50 days ago as co-counsel. We helped to free Andre Brown, who had been in prison for 23 years. So I had my inner peace. That was like the highlight. This is why I struggled through law school. My purpose in the world, without a doubt, to make sense of everything in a kaleidoscopic way. I'm here to do the work that. This is the work I'm here to do in the world. I have inner peace, and I try to live an upright life, and I hope that God is pleased with me in everything I'm doing my advocacy work. So that's the backstory. We have 17 cases. We're doing policy work in New York, PA, California, but there is in a plot twist here. Yeah. There is a sports crossover.
Yes, and to get you, so you tell me that the sports talk helped you get through those times. Tell me about this. They gave you a TV, right?
Well, they allowed me to purchase a television, yes.
And a radio?
And a radio, yeah. I had the so-called Super 3 radio. And so I used to listen to sports talk radio. But it wasn't simply listening to sports talk radio. That was more like a lifeline to the outside. I remember I used to listen all the time, Prime Sports Radio, and then One-on-One Sports, and people like Papa Joe Chevalier and Arnie Spanier and Larry Kotler, all of them. And then that changed to ESPN Radio. I had a nice routine on Sundays. I would kind of dose out on football. There would be the 1 o'clock game, the 4 o'clock game. I got them going on the radio. I'm watching a game on the black and white TV, which just had local stations. So I'm watching the Giants game, but I'm listening to the Buffalo Bills. And then I'm doing that on the 8 o'clock, Sunday night football. And then there would be also Monday night. So I loved the Sunday, had my little routine there, which helped the time go by a little faster. But that's not the only sports crossover. There was the other aspect of that. So as amongst the litany of factors, a litany of reasons why I was able to survive the experience, and another 2 points of which was that there were another wrongfully convicted man there, Frank Sterling, and we used to meet up with each other every 6 weeks, and we would keep each other going morale and wise, and we would think about what the next move was. So that was a factor. Pen pal that I didn't know showed up like in my last year in response to an ad, and I was openly asking the stranger
to the Sacramento Bee.
Yeah, to the Sacramento Bee. Yes, and I was asking the stranger, "Look, should I quit? Should I give up? Should I commit suicide?"
And why did you do it to Sacramento Bee? You didn't want the people.
I didn't want the prison authorities in New York to see me placing an ad because I got in trouble for doing that twice. Before that. The second, it was back to back. So first off, a prison guard in a prison other than the one I was housed in happened to see the ad, and he claimed that because the ad referenced that I was wrongfully incarcerated and I was looking for somebody that, they could look into my case, maybe raise some funds so I could hire a lawyer, that was soliciting, which was a violation of the rule. And yes, AM radio is a treasure in jail. But that's when you're locked in. So that comment was spot on. And then a week later, I put an ad and I got caught again. Lieutenant was like, "Well, why are you back here again? Didn't we just talk about this like a week ago?" And I said, "Yeah, we did. And I'm not trying to cause a problem in your institution. You see that my disciplinary record is very good. But the fact of the matter is, I'm in here wrongfully. I'm out of appeals. I have no money to hire an investigator and an attorney. And what am I supposed to do? Just don't place ads, just sit back and be quiet and keep a life in prison? I got to try to fight my way out of here. And that means I need to find people to help me." But somebody suggested the Sacramento Bee to me, and I figured, well, damn.
That's pretty far away.
That's pretty far away. It seems kind of safe that they're not going to catch that. So this pen pal showed up in the nick of time, helped me go morale-wise. But, in some of the letters that we wrote back and forth, we should talk about the NFL and trades and, quarterback controversies and basketball. And that was a significant part of our correspondence beyond just, the morale, survival, existential question type stuff. So sports in a second form. But I think the best sports crossover, okay? And look, you all can think I'm nuts, okay? You probably wouldn't be that
man,
wrong.
You're just trying to survive, brother.
Yes. So and I used to read Sports Illustrated when I was in the college and prison, the college library, and the college had its own library in the prison, and it had a Sports Illustrated subscription. So I used to read that while I was there. I used to read the sport. My mother's boyfriend used to send me his used sporting news, and that was like gold. And then whenever I could get my hands on a sports section in a newspaper. So those things were some of the minor creature comforts that were so important. But the best, so I guess that's a third way. But then the fourth way is that, Rob, I needed to leave the prison. I needed to leave the prison a couple of hours mentally. So the device that my mind came up with was this: when I would play basketball, when I would play ping pong, when I would play chess, I would make pretend like I was a professional player, and that my opponents were also the people on the sideline waiting for next. Those were the fans. There was like an armory, and that was home, and the gym we would play, that was for the road games. And but it really
I love that, man. They need to make a movie about this.
They should. I would love it if they did make a movie. But it wasn't that I was. But it wasn't like little kids fooling around on a playground. This was a defense mechanism that the mind came up.
So you're trying to tell me it's escapism?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, and that's why I tell people that I do not want my athletes talking a bunch of stuff that's not about sports. Start to lecture me on certain things that's way out. We come to that to get off our mind. You come to that TV at noon on and I'm in a central time zone at 12 o'clock noon in September, October, November. I want to watch the Tennessee Titans, or in your case, the New York Giants. I don't want anything to do with politics, any kind of outside noise. We want to escape reality. So you're a prime example of that. And, that's why people get irritated when athletes do all this stuff. And I think some athletes get it, but other ones don't. But that's a prime example.
And I want to build off of that point. So look, here's my opinion is that, look, if you're an athlete and you want to get involved in justice reform issues, how about this? Why don't you adopt a nonprofit agency that's doing some justice reform work, whatever it is that speaks to you? Why don't you're making millions of dollars between salary and endorsements. Why don't you drop $100,000? Why don't you become a celebrity spokesperson? Why don't you volunteer a night or two helping them fundraise and otherwise, get involved in their work to a limit. It doesn't take much to write a memo of support or go to a press conference or meet with some elected people. Why don't you do that? Okay. As opposed to you're gonna take a knee instead.
Right.
Listen, trust me, there is nobody that's doing wrongdoing within the justice system that's deterred by the possibility that you or however many other players are going to tell, I'm not going to do this because they're going to take a knee on. That's ridiculous to me. That's not the way to properly actualize it, and I really feel strongly about freedom. I love the flag.
Of course.
I don't agree with people doing that way. Those other real tangible ways, your time, a percentage of your money, which is not a lot to you, but a lot to entities trying to do this work. That should be the way that people get the way that athletes get involved in it.
Amen, brother. Pickle says first class escapism. What was your job in prison?
Yes. So every assignment, so they give you like a job in the morning and a job in the afternoon. So I felt like I was experiencing such a loss just by virtue of the fact I was in prison that I didn't want to compound it. So I didn't take any programs that were a waste of time. Like I didn't decide, for example, I'm going to work in the laundry or, I want to be a porter, which is, prison parlance to be a janitor. Everything I took had some kind of potential benefit if and when I regained my freedom. I got the GED. I learned to type. I did general business, which pertains to computer applications in the workforce, computer repair. I completed a plumbing program. I went to food service. There was another program that I became a teacher's aide. I learned how adults learned, and I worked for a year and a half helping other prisoners to prepare for GED and learn just adult basic education. So all those, and once I finished pretty much everything that there was to do, because I did the bulk of my time in Elmira. I did 13 and a half years there, not straight, meaning I got transferred to other prisons and then got back to Elmira and got transferred out and went back to Elmira. But I did the aggregate bulk of it in Elmira. So there did reach a point in time where anything I wanted to take that I had any interest in taking was completed. So at that point I felt, okay, well, I can relax a little bit. But even then I went into food service and, and I did a variety of functions, there. I learned to do that. From 1998 to 2006, had an intervention. One of the librarians, because there's like one civilian librarian, the others are prisoners, and one of the guys eventually, after about a year of my going to the general library and taking out these fiction books, he finally worked up enough nerve, and he said to me, "Look, man, I you come and you take these books out, little fantasy and witches and warlocks and damsels in distress and love, and it's some entertainment. You get out of the prison, it's reading, it's positive. I get it, but." You realize that you're like largely wasting your time with that, right? Do you get that you could be reading nonfiction books, get the escapism and have your entertainment, but also learn something? So from that point, I read 3 to 4 nonfiction books a week. I mean, I read books on self-help. I read books on relationships. I read governmental.
What's your favorite self-help book that you read in there?
Yeah, how to be an adult in a relationship. The author was David Richo. I remember I read books on politics. I kind of got bit by the bug. My favorite book, this was this huge book. It was called The Ambition and the Power, Fall of Jim Wright. Obviously a reference of the former Speaker of the House who Newt Gingrich took down in the course of his rise. So I enjoyed that book. And I remember the book Veil, which was about the CIA's secret wars with the Reagan administration under their nose. So I read books on politics and then I kind of felt like, in a way, and I tried to read one book on each president. And I feel
nice.
Yes, and I used to write down the books that I read in a notebook, and I feel like as I read books on the different presidents and other politicians, I felt that in a lot of ways I could kind of trace the collective mentality by the decisions that were made in the elections. I felt like I could trace the collective mindset and mood and ideas of the country as it moved from one era to the next. So I really enjoyed doing that, and I felt like I learned a lot that way. And when I eventually exhausted all the books that the library had on those subjects, then I took up a different tactic. I thought, well, look, let me try to read just one book on one subject, something even that I don't have any interest in. I remember I read a book on it was about different careers in the music industry. I mean, beyond the obvious ones, right? Beyond being a manager, being a band member, or even being the singer. And I read, a lot of the behind the scenes type of people. So that's just an example. I read books about a lot of things I didn't have any interest in, but just to kind of like broaden my perspective. So.
Nice. What about how to win friends and influence people? Dale Carnegie.
Yes, I read that. I did read that book. I loved the book Tuesdays with Maury, which of course was written by Mitch Albom, so another indirect
Detroit sports writer.
Yeah, so I remember reading that, and then there was I read the series John Gray, the Men Are From Mars, Women Venus, and Lieberman's book, Never Be Lied to Again, and what are some of the telltale signs involved in that. I remember I had Hamilton. So Hamilton's there was a catalog called Hamilton's. It was thicker than a newspaper, and it had all these books, and I started ordering the books because they tell you what they normally cost, and then they were at significant discounts. So I remember reading a lot of ordering presidential books that way. I remember I read a book on President Roosevelt. Theodore
says Truman was his favorite.
Yeah, and then the making, of course, the Making of the President series, Theodore White. Making of the President 1968, Making of the President 1960, 64. All these different ones. There was a book by Milton Eisenhower.
You could have been a history teacher.
Milton Eisenhower had the book, The President is Calling, which of course would be the way that, so when the president wants to call somebody, a switchboard operator actually places the call and waits, and only when it's connected and someone answers, then they connect to the president, so he can still be doing, whatever it is they're doing right up until the last. But Truman, yes, I read a book on, I did read a book on Truman. It was called The Conquerors, but of course that overlapped. That was both FDR and Truman in the prosecution of the war. Yeah. So, but I read a lot of the stuff. I got a kick out of him. I'm reliving it now, man. You got me smiling and remembering.
Hey, did you?
Yes, I did. So human interest question. So through all this, did I ever meet my dad? So yes. So when I was released, within the first few months, I needed to get a copy of my birth certificate. That led me back to Terrytown. And so I went to the Terrytown clerk's office, and I found out that this was after I called them, but that the birth certificate nonetheless was not ready, and they would take several hours to do that. So I had a couple of hours to kill, and my mother had always told me that my father lived in Terrytown. She had always told me his name and the name of the business. So I found the business. I just asked a couple of locals on the street, where's this business at? And I went to go see him. I went in the store. I mean, I thought I was going to find somebody that looked like me. He did not. He looked nothing at all like me. And I mentioned his name, and he had been a low-level foot soldier for the mafia, right? I mean, he's gone now. He's passed, so it doesn't matter. But he had been a low-level.
What family?
Yeah, his name was Hank Bucci, and the name of his store in Terrytown was called Hank's Alley. And as his sign kind of humorously said, they bought junk and sold antiques.
Yeah.
But but so when I
That's
asked him,
funny,
is that
man.
his name? Yeah, so I asked him, is that his name, and he confirmed, and he confirmed that it was. And then he looked at me like he expected me to like assault him, like, or that, his past was catching up on him. And once I convinced him that I wasn't there for any harm, and then the next thing he wanted to know was whether I wanted some, financial remunerations from him. Once I convinced him that none of that was the case, he like calmed the heck down, and he relaxed. And
Yeah.
I went to see him like maybe like 5 or 6 times. He never accepted me as his son. He always denied it. I wanted to do the paternity test. He didn't want to. I wasn't about to take him to court to force him to do it. He once in a while I used to go and see him. And story kind of has a sad ending. I mean, I'm in law school, and every now and then he dawns on me, and yeah, I should go see him. And yeah, but I've got this test, that test, this thing, that thing of life.
Yeah.
So it's not the right time, another point in time, future.
Yeah.
And so that went on for most of my law school, 3 years in law school. And eventually, so I'm at a birthday party for another exoneree in Manhattan. And this, I don't know the technical name, but he was a camera guy, but he was on screen, but he interviewed, but he wanted to make a movie or documentary. So whatever one word there'd be for like a jack of all trades there.
Yeah.
And he had done some research on me in contemplation of him doing a movie on me, which, never happened, but that's a different story. But
now that wasn't these guys that you had an issue with.
No.
You had to sue for $1 million.
I'll get to that story in a minute. No, that's unrelated.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
No, but the point is, he had done some research. He knew who my father's name was.
Yeah,
and he said, "Well, look, is this? Is this him? This is what he looks like? This is the name of his store? Because the article says that he passed away." I'm like, "Well, wait a minute, hold on." And I googled it, and yeah, sure enough, he unfortunately passed away. So that's how that ended. That was the thing with my dad. And the other thing with that is, I think, and he articulated this to me, part of the reason why he did not want to do the paternity, I mean, aside from him just like denying the account my mother gave, was he said, well, look, you can't go back in time. It is what it is. And what's the next step? What's like in chess, right? What's the next move after that? What you want to meet my wife after that, and you want to meet my other kids, and you want to disrupt their lives. What's going to flow from all of that? So that was part of his rationale, and not wanting to do that. But yeah, you're right. Going to the question you asked me, yeah, I mean, I was scammed out of $1 million. I mean, thank God I'm not broke. That wasn't the whole thing. I'm still fine. But I mean, it really wasn't nice what happened to me. And basically this. I mean, who thinks that a former district attorney investigator with a PhD with a security company that was the go-to commentator on CNN post 9/11, that who's the host of a show, that person's going to facilitate my being scammed by the owner of a show, with my being lured in. Look, I'll join your board. I'll help you raise money. The new show called The Security Brief, we'll co-brand with your foundation, and we'll give you a few free commercials every show. And they had 5 ways to Sunday that the show really couldn't miss, except that it did. And then the lady just took off, and there was no more assets. I brought the lawsuit, but ultimately, I mean, we couldn't find her. The company itself didn't have any money, and the judge's position was that this co-host that was very much a part of roping me in, that despite his owning a 2% of the company, he nonetheless was an employee, not an owner. There wasn't enough of a nexus, and so he was about to dismissed the case against him. And so I had to fold shop and just, stop bleeding money into litigation. So that's actually how that turned out, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. I kind of got ahead of myself. All right. So the process, I hear you tell this story. I will go a little bit over. If you're okay, you're okay with time?
Well, I'm okay with time. I'm having fun.
I'm okay too. It's very interesting, man. You got a great story to tell, brother. I tell you. Now, I was listening to another interview you did about a year ago, and the lady who's working with this organization to get you out, when she finally tells you that you're going to get out, you tell her, no, it's not true. You don't play with me like that.
Yes.
Let's hear that again. I love that. Tell my audience that.
Yes. So I had just been transferred a couple of days before that from Elmira to Sing Sing, which is in Westchester County. So again, that's about 50 minutes from Manhattan, which is where Nina Morrison, my attorney from the Innocence Project, is located at. So she comes up to see me, and first of all, in prison, when they crack open the door, you're supposed to like find out why, like what is it they want you to do. So I run down the gallery, you open my door. Yeah, you have a visit. Well, why don't you double check that? Okay. Because it's not unheard of that they open the wrong cell and the wrong person goes down on the visit. Right.
Oh, so, God.
Yeah. I mean, one time somebody went, to digress for half a second. One time one of the prisoners went to the visit, and when he got in the visiting room, and the guard told him that this lady come to see him, and then he walked over there and said, to this lady, he didn't know, did you come to see me? And she looked at him like he was nuts and said, no. And so when he went back to the cell, we all learned of the story, and he was wrecked. We all made fun of him.
I feel bad for him, and I don't know him from my Adams.
Yeah, well, I mean, but he got us out of hell for 10 minutes. We kept it a light heart in prison, and so that was a little entertainment at his expense there. So with that in mind,
God,
but with that in mind, an incident similar to that,
take you to the top of the freaking moon and then down to the floor in a split second.
Yeah,
right?
Man, exactly.
Man.
So yeah, he calls up, he confirms. So then I run back to my cell, and I have this little routine like other prisoners do. We have like a visit shirt. This is our one time that we're going to come in contact with the public, and so we have a special shirt that's ironed and just kept nice. So I got the shirt on, and I'm hurrying up to get down there because the visiting room is quite a ways away from my cell. And if I don't get in the visiting room by a certain amount of time before they start they do a count to make sure that no one's escaped and that no one's dead. And if you're not, once they start counting, all inmate movement stops. So I didn't want to be stuck outside the visiting room, because that would mean there'd be at least an hour and a half wait that my visitor, whoever that was, would experience just sitting there at a table waiting for me. So I go in the visiting room, and this lady's waving. She's going like this to me, and I wave back, but I don't know her. And I'm thinking, well, I think she's mistaking me for somebody else, or maybe she remembers me from Elmira or something. So the officer at the desk comes, and I ask her, who's my visitor? And she points to her, but then she says, well, don't you know who came to see you? So at that point, fearing that she might cancel the visit, should I say yes, I basically lied to her and said, yeah, of course I do. Right? So, listen, the visit's the highlight of the month.
I got nothing but time, lady.
That's right. So I went over there, and she introduces herself, and, as my lawyer mentions her name. And at this point, remember, I've lost like 7 appeals, and, often on procedural, like once I lost in federal court because the court clerk gave my lawyer the wrong information and on the filing procedure.
You can't catch a break at this point.
Right, which resulted in my legal work arriving 4 days late, and the court dismissed my case based on that. And then the next 3 courts, including by Sonia Sotomayor, upheld that ruling twice. And so I've had experience with these technicalities, is what the point of it is. So my antennas are up, and I'm waiting for any sign of anything to be out the ordinary. And when she tells me that the items have been tested, that was my sign that something was out the ordinary, because as I told her, the items are not supposed to be tested for another month. And she's like, no, the DA pulled some strings, got them to test it a little bit faster. And then she says, the results match the actual perpetrator. You're going home tomorrow. And you're exactly, I said, no, I'm not. I'm not going home.
Don't play with me like that.
Don't play with me like that. I'm not entertaining that. We went back and forth 2 more times, so an aggregate of 3. And then I had this literal 3.5 hours of mental paralysis. She sat there, held my hand. All these thoughts of going through my head, one after the other, one thought having nothing to do with the other, and none of them having anything at all, even in the slightest, to this news she's given me. And she's just sitting there listening, taking it all in. And every now and then she would break in and say, "Are you ready to talk about tomorrow yet?" And no. And so eventually she says, "Look, visit hours are almost over. There's a ton of things to do between now and tomorrow. There's a lot of media to be contacted. We need to get your clothing sizes so you can go to court in a suit, your shoe size, all of that." And that made it real. And I felt better for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then a different fear cropped into my head. And I was afraid that something was going to happen between that day and tomorrow, the next day. And then the DA would change her mind, and then I would just stay. I'd stay in prison, and they do what they always do, just fight me and win. But that didn't happen. They didn't change their mind. I mean, I remember when I went to court, and I remember they put me in. They gave me the outside ID, and then they go to put me, they asked me where am I going to send my property. The guards, being the guards, they're lazy. They're not going to carry more than one small bag. By that point, the only address I had memorized was the Innocence Project. So I gave them that. They gave me the outside ID, and then I'm waiting to go. And this guard comes up to me with some handcuffs. And I'm like, well, what's that about? I mean, you and your colleagues know that I'm going home. That's why you just took the photo and gave me the ID, and you give me an address to. But then they told me the last thing I wanted to hear. He came up with a line of reasoning. Well, the judge might change his mind once you get to court. So we can't. Yeah, and I said before he said that, I said, I mean, what do you think? I'm going to try to escape on my way to prison? On my way to court, where they're going to let me out on their own? And then he said that to me. But I'm in the car. They're driving me from Ossining, New York, now to White Plains. I used to go to Ossining because that was just a town or two south of Peekskill. That was elsewhere in Westchester. So I'm marveling at the street, and just how just a few feet of steel in the car separates me from the vehicles passing by and the people walking on the sidewalks. And I kind of marveled at the juxtapositions of our reality, so close but so far, and how they were completely oblivious to me and my reality, my existence there. And they brought me to the courtroom, and eventually they brought me to the court, and eventually I got into the courtroom. But and then when I got ready to go in the courtroom, the guards told me, "Well, look, you got your family on one side of the court, there's the media on the other side, and I'm really not. I'm thinking about the media because they all crucified me at the time of the trial, right. So as I go in, I got my chest kind of puffed out a bit, like a I told you so type of posture.
Oh, okay.
And trying to recognize anybody that's there. And, I go to the courtroom and I sit down, and Barry Scheck leans over to me and says, I was in the judge's chamber earlier today talking to him. You're definitely going home today. So then the judge he comes in. So the case is supposed to go back in front of the judge who presided over the
Barry
trial.
Scheck was there? Is this on film?
It's not on film, but Barry Scheck was there. Yeah.
I believe you, man. I believe you.
You should, because it is on film, the press conference after that, and that he is on film for.
Is that on YouTube?
No, that's not on YouTube. I'm trying to. There's a formatting issue. Maybe I'll talk with you about it.
Okay. Hey, yeah, that's awesome, man. I mean, I hate to cut you off, but this is wow.
So it's time to speak.
Like
my first words at the press conference are, "Is this really happening?"
Oh,
like I thought. I finally went ahead and did it. I managed to lose my mind, and I'm just completely on La La Land, just floating around out there.
So everything was in slow motion.
I'm going to regain my senses, and I'm going to see the prison walls and the bars and everything. That was what was in my head. Yeah. And from there, I went to my aunt's house, and I'd love to tell everybody that it was a raucous party that went on to the wee hours of the night, the wee hours of the morning, I should say. But the reality was, by that point, I had long since lost track of everybody. I lost just about all my friends when I was arrested. And I had two friends came to see me. One of them came to see me one time in prison. Another one hung out with me for about 5 years. Then he went to the military. We lost touch. So by that point, there was nobody else that I knew. I remember I was sitting around the table, me, my aunt, my mother, another member of the extended family who couldn't make the court proceedings came over, and they were all talking. Yeah. And I remember just feeling out of place and not being able to relate to anybody. So I got up and I went outside. I wanted to sit down out in the nighttime, because normally in the prison, when it becomes night, they make it go back inside. They close the yard, at least.
Is that when it really sunk in that you're free?
Yeah, that is when it really sunk in that I was free. But periodically, I would feel like a metaphorical tapping on my back. What are you doing? You know, you're like you're out of place. I mean, all these other people belong out here. You don't, but they don't realize that you don't. But you know that you don't. And so I would have those moments, and I would have other moments where I didn't quite think that everything I had just been through actually happened. And then at still other times, I wasn't quite sure that I really was home. And of course, a fourth different thing was just being generally unsure. Like, am I going to a am I allowed to pick up a can of something, or, look at this, or what's actually allowed, So it was a lot to,
it was a transition.
It was a lot of transition. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I tell you, that's an amazing story. So you said essentially now is 5 years to get that settlement
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So how did that go about?
So I interviewed different lawyers, and eventually I decided to go with so unrelated to the Innocence Project, Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, they have a civil rights firm. And I ultimately, although I flirted and entertained and almost signed with someone else, I ultimately signed with them. I kind of looked at it as a type of continuity that those two at least were in common between the two entities, and they already knew my case. And one entity that they set up was able to win the case. So I'm pretty sure the second entity that they set up are also competent, because I had my experiences with bad lawyers. Yeah. So I wound up doing that. So it took about 5 years for that. And then I had the federal civil rights lawsuit also. And so in the fifth year, at some point after settling the state case, I was able to. So I had 4 defendants in the federal civil rights lawsuit. In the state case, the state's the defendant. In the federal civil rights lawsuit, you're seeking to hold the municipalities accountable for the actions of their employees. So I had 4 defendants. I had sued Westchester County because it was their medical examiner committed the fraud. They settled with me. I sued Westchester County Legal Aid because for legal malpractice. They settled with me. City of Peekskill because they fabricated evidence, coerced a false confession out of me. The fabrication of evidence was that was 2 things. So firstly, the Peekskill police, they purposely did not document any of the witness interviews. So they interviewed about 17 witnesses who knew Angela in one capacity or another. They all told the police that she didn't have a boyfriend. There was no consensual sex. They purposely did not document that. And so we didn't know that existed. So that was that. And then there was the Putnam County Sheriff, Putnam County, because of their polygraphers. I went to trial with him and I won. But all told, it took 10 years. It took 10 long years on that.
Yeah, and my understanding after the smoke clears took home about 12 million, or did I?
About 15 that I received. I mean, then you have to pay.
Well, you deserve it, brother.
You have to pay the lawyers, for sure. But nothing was worth it, though. But still, it helped me to rebuild my life, though.
Yeah.
But there's another sporting crossover that I just wanted to quickly mention.
Yeah.
Well, I learned to play chess while I was in prison, and somebody taught me. I mean, somebody had taught me how to play, and then I started taking it seriously, and I started buying some chess books. I developed mini chess library. So I started playing when I was in food service. I played maybe 10 to 15 games a day. I got very good. I got to the point where I was winning maybe like 90% of the games. And I bought a subscription to Chess Life, and they had the section in the back where they would list all the different tournaments, which I would just kind of like dream and fantasize about going to play. But the other thing, oh, okay, I remember. Yeah, but they also had correspondence chess. You could play by mail. You know, you could play by mail, and you mail moves back and forth. And I remember I played some games.
So do you play in tournaments now?
I haven't. I'd like to start. I mean, my life has kind of been consumed by the advocacy work, but I really would like to start. I really would like to start playing. Now, one thing I have to get used to is I was not playing with a clock. So I have to try to get used to it. So just the act of pushing the clock. It's not that I need a lot of time for my moves. I mean, I don't play speed chess. That's a different thing. But I can, a game that's maybe like, 10 to 20 minutes or something like that, but where it's not. But just the act of, pushing the clock, that thing down, you push one side like a seesaw. That was kind of I found it hard to do. I mean, I've tried to do it a few times. I found it hard. I found it was kind of like a distraction, from the way I would just kind of lock everything in. But I do want to start. I have started playing back again, last couple of years, and I'm still pretty good at it. And look, I love thinking ahead. I mean, I kind of have a philosophy of playing chess in life. You make one move, and this is what's the outcome? What does it lead to? And what are your preventions for this or that, or if this occurs, what are your counters? So I really love chess and the idea how it trains people to think ahead.
How much are you into football?
Very, very much. So
here we go. We got a big game.
Yeah, we have a good game. I feel like the Eagles are the much stronger team.
Yeah.
Looking at the playoff games. I mean, they gave up a touchdown in each of their games. The defense was really strong. The Chiefs were really lucky to beat the Bengals. I mean, look, when the Bengals took over late in the fourth quarter, about like I don't know if it was 6 minutes or 4 minutes to go, and then they were driving. I mean, it looked like they were all set up to win, and Aside did that stupid penalty. Which look, that call, I understand they're trying to protect him, and it doesn't come down to just one play. I mean, why didn't Burrow and why didn't offensive line hold up and Burrow moved them down the thing? Why did the interceptions, and why didn't they just hold them a little bit more? That's all true, but the fact of the matter is none of those things happened, and they still had the chance to go into overtime, and he committed this stupid penalty. There was no way. I don't believe there was any way that they were going to get another 15 yards given the small time left, no timeouts. He basically they were going to kick a 57-yarder into the wind. I didn't think that was going to happen.
What my theory on that is that, and I'm sure you keep up with it, the lead up, Cincinnati was very chirpy coming into that game.
Yeah.
And I think that the refs, and this was in Kansas City, I think they kind of looked the other way on some of those calls. That looked like there was a late hit on Burrow in the possession before that they probably should have called. And I thought that was a crap. Like you said, that call, that linebacker on Patrick Mahomes, I feel like there's some human element there. I don't think it's rigged, but I see what you're saying, though. It was kind of just either let them play or not unless it's a mugging.
That was a poorly officiated game overall. Awful. But I think if he doesn't do that late hit, I'm sure the game goes into overtime. And remember they went in overtime last year. At that point, it was anybody's game. The football is a big role. I mean, I mentioned in surviving my ordeal in prison and for prisoners in general. And look, it was fun watching the Super Bowl. While I was.
What's your favorite Super Bowl while you're in there?
It's a tie. It was a tie. I mean, was it the the 1 point Super Bowl? The Giants in the upset over the Bills on Scott Norwood's missed field goal. Is it the 1 point, or or is it the 1 yard game, which of course was the Titans versus the Rams.
And I'm out of Nashville, brother. I mean, I'm still getting
Steve
over that.
McNair hooks up. He hooks up with Kevin Dyson and he extends, but London Fletcher comes out of nowhere from the end zone, makes the tackle right there on the 1 yard line.
Yeah,
I'm hearing the play.
I think it was Mike Jones, but
extends, trying to go in, but no, he does not get in. The game is over. I mean, Jeff Fisher's theory on that was, hey, we didn't lose the Super Bowl. We simply ran out of time, and I believe that wholeheartedly. But so it's kind of hard between which of those two. Is it the 1 point game or is it the 1 yard game? I don't know.
Oh wow! Well, that one broke my heart, brother. I tell you, the Buffalo. Did you watch the Buffalo Bill Music City Miracle game?
I did.
I was at that game.
They lost that game. You did.
Yes, I waited 6 hours for tickets. Very cold. Somebody offered me double the amount of money. My brother-in-law, he gassed me up to go. I didn't take the money, even though I'm like 18. I could use the money. So we get the 50-yard line, upper level. And, I never forget. I mean, you're hugging strangers. You're walking down the street. You're on this. They call it Music City Miracles. We thought God was going to let us win the Super Bowl. And God, you let us come up 1 yard short. Because I thought maybe Tennessee would score there and maybe go for 2 because they had a lot of injuries in that Super Bowl. But it didn't happen that way. I'm okay.
So aren't you happy? Aren't you happy that you did not? Unlike, I have to believe that a lot of fans left after the Bills scored and went ahead.
Yes, all the section behind us left.
The possible scenario was the run back.
Yes.
But that's what they pulled off.
Yeah.
The Music City Miracle.
I practically lost my voice, Yeah,
I still don't understand why. I still don't understand why the Bills started Rob Johnson that game as opposed to Doug Flutie.
Yes.
That was, I feel that
I'm
was.
I'm happy they did start Rob Johnson.
Well,
so was Marcellus Wiley.
He was fast. He could run. He was smaller.
Yeah.
Rob Johnson really couldn't. But yeah, that was wow. I mean, again, these are I hate to make an analogy, but I will, man. These are all really good memories in a dark time period, almost analogous to like an abused kid, who grows up in an overall abusive environment. But, occasionally some other family member takes him or her out one place or another for a day or two. And they have this little thing to look back on after they're an adult and they look back. But I mean, it kind of feels that way. And I remember the 4 Falls of Buffalo and all of that. And
good start for Buffalo, man. I do.
Yeah,
I thought they were going to beat Cincinnati a couple of weeks ago.
I thought that they were too. I mean, I couldn't believe that they turned in such a poor performance, and they really were favored to get back to the Super Bowl. I mean, I still think the defensive coordinator should have been fired for Buffalo just on letting Mahomes score twice, particularly with what was it, like 30 seconds left.
Talking about last year.
Last year, I mean, you guys can't hold them. I mean, the guy, Josh Allen engineers 2 drives, within 2 minutes. You can't stop somebody for 30. It's ridiculous. Yeah. I think the coordinator should have been fired on.
They don't do nothing up there. They don't do nothing. They probably should do away with McDermott and get an offensive minded head coach, if you ask me.
Yeah, I certainly would agree with that. But look, I think the Eagles are going to win. I know that both quarterbacks are a little bit hurt. Jalen Hurts has the shoulder. Mahomes has the bad wheel. But I have to believe that the bad wheel is the worst out of the two.
Really?
The 2 injury. I don't believe the 2 injuries are equal.
Yeah.
So I think that, I would rather have the quarterback with the non-throwing shoulder injury. I'd rather have that quarterback than the quarterback.
Well, you're a fair Giants fan.
Right, but I think that the biggest difference between the 2 teams, though, is I think that the Eagles have a much stronger defense than what Kansas City does.
Yeah. That what's his name? Howie Roseman. I read the other day he won Executive of the Year, the Writers Association, the general manager. I mean, what a roster. I've got a guy coming in on Thursday. If you got time, tune in. Philly sports guy. He's going to be at the, he's a super fan, man. He does the paint and everything. Professional.
Send me the link. I definitely will watch. You've triggered a memory. Like they have word association, memory. So you've triggered a memory. This was before everything happened to me.
What happened?
But before the for the arrest, the wrongful conviction, all that other stuff. But when I was at the height of being a kid, so it was me and a different one of my me and one of my other best friends, we had this routine, and so we used to play the game Double Dribble on the Nintendo.
Yeah.
And while we were playing, we also had kept records. Like we came up with different teams, and we had like a little league, and we kept records. And some of the teams could go to the playoffs, and and then we had the playoff thing, the playoff games. And while we're playing the game and playing the regular season and the postseason, we're simultaneously doing the color commentary. We're Rick Berry, Skip Carey, Marv Albert, and rotating.
I was going to ask you that.
We were rotating between doing play-by-play and the commentary. We would use their phrases, and then we would take turns like interviewing each other. Like I'd be the sideline reporter, and you'd be the player. And damn it, we were pretty damn good.
Yeah.
And look, one day I'm going to throw something out to the universe. I'm going to throw something out to the universe. There was another exoneree in Cleveland by the name of Raymond Towler, who did 30 years prior to being exonerated, also by DNA. And he did an interview, and he just kind of threw it out there. He said, man, I would love to go, but I know that that's a little bit too much to ask, and which is kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing. He was really cracking for a ticket without asking for a ticket. But the brass, somebody in the higher up in the Cavalier organization saw that. Yeah. And he got a ticket. He got a ticket to go. And then in the halftime, this was when Shaquille O'Neal was still with the Cavs. He came out the tunnel and got Raymond from down there, and they brought him to center court, and he socialized a bit. So that same way of throwing it out there, I'm gonna throw it out there. Okay. I would love one day, even if it's just a preseason game. Yeah. Okay. I would love to don the headsets, and I would love to call a game. I would love to call it, and I would love to call an NBA game. The same phrases and all the stuff. And
who's your favorite NBA commentator all time?
Oh, all time, without a doubt. The play-by-play man is Marv Albert for sure.
Yeah,
Marv Albert, and then my favorite, the color commentator, without a doubt, is Hubie Brown. Because if you listen to Hubie
Corey,
Brown,
that's Corey's favorite. That's my friend right there.
All right. If you can listen to Hubie Brown, he'll teach you the game as he's doing it. He'll teach you the game, and I wish one day I'd give it a chance. So I'm just kind of throwing it out there to do that. It would be amazing. One time, there was like a wrongful conviction night. When maybe the tickets are raised $5 more or whatever, and go, whether it's my organization, the Jeffrey Desker Foundation for Justice, or Innocence Project, or whatever, but some entity that's working at freeing people, that would be a dream. Just to find even just like an ambassador. People, these different athletes, they have much bigger platform than I ever, than I could. But you could donate a night, man. There's 6 tickets. They're going for $5,000 or $10,000 a pop. You're gonna have dinner with me, conversation. Jeff will be there also. And just donate a night. Just to do something. And have a short promo video that's released out there on their social media platforms. Because the reality is this. Is we have 17 cases approved. But we don't have the bandwidth to move all those cases at the same time. We really need more attorneys, more paralegals, more investigators, more essential personnel to not just move those cases, but to just expand the amount of innocent people we could work on freeing. We're not even taking new applications now, even though we're getting several hundred new applications a year. The ultimate dream would be to have a chapter of the foundation in each state and ultimately in each country, because I really see this as a worldwide issue. And in countries where we're not hearing about wrongful conviction, it's not the exonerations. It's not because the wrongful convictions aren't happening. It's that nobody's catching and correcting them. There's nobody working on papers. But the only way to accomplish that, is we get public support. So always looking for board members, donors of all sizes, celebrity people, athletes. The board, the ambassadorship. Or earlier, I mentioned I saw you doing the Patreon pitch as well for your show, which people definitely should support. We have a Patreon page there as well. So and
I like what you said in another interview. Not to cut you off, but you said 4%. Okay, what? There's hundreds of flights of day airplanes that fly out in America every day. What if 4% went down? I mean, that's 4 out of 100. Something has to be done. That's a tragedy.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I like looking at it in that, and I'm glad you brought that up. I like looking at it in that lens, but it does not seem that state governments, federal government, it doesn't seem to be a big issue. It doesn't seem to be a concern. Like, it's maddening. It's maddening to me that my colleagues, whether Restorative Justice International or other coalition groups, it could happen to you, Right to Remain Silent, Court New York Deserves. Why do we have to engage in this multi-year long campaign, banging our heads against the wall, keep making all these trips to all these, mobilizing the public, getting petitions signed and sign-on letters and doing press conferences? Why is it so hard to pass legislation aimed at preventing wrongful convictions? If we know what the causes are, and we do, thanks to DNA, it's opened a window into the justice system, into these deficiencies. It gives us an unassailable pile of data to look at cases and to identify these causes. Why is it so hard to pass legislation aimed at preventing that? Can we at least plug things up so that we can stop having these wrongful convictions happen, at least in the same way? In the same way. Like my wrongful conviction caused by coerced false confession. I'm still trying, me and colleagues, we're still trying to pass a law right now that would mandate that all custodial interrogations be videotaped from beginning to end. When they passed the law, they made exceptions for homicide, sex offenses, drug cases. Well, those are the cases we need it the most. Why we still, and I've been home for 6 years.
It runs people's life,
Right. Why is it so hard to do that?
Did you ever forgive those cops, by the way?
That's a really good question. I really don't think about it that way. I'm not an angry person. I want to enjoy my life as much as I can, and I can't do that if I'm angry or bitter. If I was to be angry or bitter, I would really be the only loser in that scenario. And I feel like I've lost so much as is, why would I want to, in effect, lose the rest of my life? So I'm not angry based on that. The vehicle that I use to, actualize that, I take the energy I feel and I channel it through the advocacy work that I do. Yeah. But in terms of saying, hey, will I forgive them? I mean, I don't really think about it. I don't. Yeah. If I was to really think about it,
it's easier said than done, I guess.
It is. Yeah. It is. I think if I was forced to give an answer right now, I would say I'm not there right now. I would say the answer is no, but with the caveat being that I don't have them on my heart. I don't have them in my head. I'm not obsessing about them. I'm not thinking about them. I'm not hung up on what happened to me, other than, I'm in a desperate fight to free people in that position that I was in, and in doing the policy work aimed at preventing that from happening. So I'm just taking that negative and turned it to the positive, because that's the only thing I could do. I mean, I would rather go back in time. I would rather somebody else have the mantle. I'd rather give the money back and go into debt for the same amount. But I can't do any of those things.
Right.
The only thing I can do now is just to do the best that I can today and tomorrow. And so I do this work.
It's good stuff, man. Good stuff. I hope if they make a movie, if you need a sports guy, I can play a small role. Real serious question real quick, and I got to wrap it up. I'm over, but man, you've been a great guest. Man, you've been good. Thank you for coming on. LeBron is about to pass Kareem. Okay, LeBron or Jordan? Who's the greatest?
Oh, that's easy, Jordan.
You are the best. You're passing all my tests, brother.
Yeah, definitely Jordan. Listen, I had a ball. This was the funnest interview I've done. We covered a lot of bases. I mean, the amount of film work you did, was incredible. Yet we mixed in lots of fun things. We talked about stuff for sports. I really enjoyed that. Thanks so much for having me on. Would love to do other sports things. I'm hoping some other sports shows, would consider that.
What's your what's your most knowledge? Because I'd like to bring you on and have you comment on a big story. What do you keep up with the most?
In terms of sports, or
sports?
Yeah, sports. It's a close tie between the NFL and the NBA.
Okay, well, that's my two strong. I mean, if you got time sometime,
I would love to come back on. I'd love to. Oh my God, Corey! I mean, not yet. The Corey's your guy, but Rob, I'd love to come back on and just do some commentary and trades and this and that. I mean, I'm curious to see what's going to happen. I mean, can Luka and Kyrie Irving coexist? It's not such a simple answer.
That's $64,000 question.
They take a ton of shots. They're used to playing, with the ball. On the other hand, I feel like the Nets got a ton back, but what's the implications? Is KD out of there now?
Right.
What about LeBron? Do the Lakers make a move with LeBron and Antonio Davis? So there's a lot of stuff that's
Anthony Davis.
Anthony Davis, right? And do the Warriors stay pat? Do they stay pat? Do they fix their bench? So I have to say this: I'm good in the NFL, but I'm even better in the NBA. So
okay, your analysis of the NFL, you're really good. When I ask people these questions, I want to see how much they really know, and I can tell you keep up with it week to week, don't you?
I do. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you follow the stories and stuff. Are you on Twitter or anything? Are you on Twitter?
Oh, well, I'm not on. I have a page there. It's inactive. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn. The Instagram.
Well, I'll add you on Facebook, because I was just asking because, I go on Twitter and I follow like Ian Rappaport, Adam Scheffner, and I just love to see the breaking NFL news. Where Derek Carr. Derek Carr visited for my audience, by the way. He's supposed to visit with New Orleans. I think that's crazy, but maybe. What about Derek Carr to the Jets?
That's very. I prefer Derek Carr to the Jets than Aaron Rodgers to the Jets, because I feel like Aaron has much more limited shelf life. I fear it's going to turn out the same way that it turned out with Brett Favre to the Jets. Derek definitely has more years left in him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, I know it's crazy to say, but I really don't feel that the Jets were all that far away from being a contender to make a Super Bowl appearance. I don't feel they were that far away, considering how their season went and some of the games that they lost that they really should have won. They're
like the Commanders. They're a quarterback away, man.
Yes. Yeah, they are, and I think Derek Carr needs a change of scenery. Hey, Garoppolo to the Raiders, or at least he can stay in California. That works that way.
Well, if he can just stay healthy for 2 seasons or a season.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he's something. Hey, man, is there anything else? Are you good on everything?
I just want to make one thing. So So there is a documentary short that if you enjoyed the interview, there is a documentary short available on Amazon Prime about me called Conviction. It's about my advocacy work and life post exoneration. And if you're out there, if you can suggest me to whether it's another podcast or traditional media, blog, whatever it is, I do it all. So would love to would love to people spread word out. And I still speak across the country. I do some internationally. So again, just kind of throwing it out there. But listen,
awesome,
thanks again so much for having me on.
Hey, stay in touch.
Absolutely.
If you want to come back on for something, if you got a sports rant,
all right,
please contact me and we'll come back on. I'm usually on the same time, Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Excellent. I will check that out. I will do that. You haven't seen the last of me yet. So
thank you, man. Appreciate what you do, buddy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, guys.